seen two of them on the way over here down on I-75 going to farm.
This hillside is one of the photo sites for the annual Sand Hill Crane Days held near Birchwood, Tennessee. Hollywood paparazzi could not be more intent on documenting their subjects. But alas, all they will see today is an empty landscape, yet some will wait for hours just for the chance a crane will come along. The bad news for these folks is the heavy rains of the winter have flooded the wetlands below. The sandhill cranes prefer shorelines they can wade, and now the water is too deep, so they are scattered about the countryside. While not as picturesque as the scene in front of them, the photographers would have had better luck looking for cranes in farm fields and front yards.
East Tennessee pioneers would have been shocked to see a hillside full of folks just interested in looking at birds. Their view of wildlife was much different than today's.
Pioneers may have appreciated the beauty of wildlife, but their need for survival made it just a passing fancy. For the pioneers, all wild animals fell into one classification. There were dangerous animals that had to be killed. There were animals with valuable skins and furs that had to be killed. And then food animals, those needed to be killed too. In time, it was obvious that wild animals could not survive limitless killing. The near extinction of the American bison by market hunters was a case in point. As wildlife populations continued to dwindle, no matter how distasteful any government controls were considered to be, people began to accept the need for hunting seasons and limits to the kill. Even with new regulations, it was too late for many species in Tennessee. The top predators were all gone by the early 1900s. Other species hung on with the smallest of numbers.
Even limiting the number of animals killed each year didn't help game animals bounce back. Captive breeding programs proved unsuccessful. What was needed was suitable habitat. Wildlife refuges were created to provide sanctuary for the fragile populations.
Over time, stricter game laws and habitat protection stabilized the declining populations. And then they began to grow. Then as people became more urbanized, fewer people were hunting. This is where it gets interesting.
Remember that one group of animals, the dangerous ones that needed killing? Well, no one wanted those dangerous predators back, and they're still gone. There's nothing in place to control the booming populations of all kinds of animals, not just game animals.
This second emergence of wild animals within our midst has caused an interesting dilemma. On this Heartland Series episode, we'll meet the people on the front lines of wildlife management. From the wildlife officer to the researchers to the wildlife control professionals. We'll see how the numbers of an uncontrolled species can explode in little more than a decade. How nature hates a vacuum and fills it with whatever is available, desirable or not. We learn that even when some species are booming, others are caught in a struggle for survival. And in the end, managing people may be the biggest job of all.
The Heartland Series, a celebration of a people and their land, presents Second Nature, Return of the Wild.
Despite vast stretches of undeveloped forest and open space in East Tennessee, today's landscape is different from the landscape of 200 years ago. The forest itself is different. Gone are the chestnut trees, great stands of them wiped out in less than 40 years by blight. The chestnut provided food for a number of wild animals, as well as pioneers. While other trees, such as the oaks, have taken over in the absence of the chestnut. The chestnut's role in providing mass for wild animals has never truly been replaced. It is difficult for today's forest to sustain the same number of animals per acre. A bad mast harvest, combined with merely average birth rates, leads to a food shortage for many wild animals. The search for food often takes creatures into places that can only mean trouble. Black bears in the Great Smoky Mountains are a prime example. In some cases, they don't leave the park to find food. Human food finds them.
What people have to understand is the behavior that we want is a wild bear. And when I ask people what a wild bear is, you get all kinds of different answers, but it's really one that's afraid of people. So we've made some significant changes in how we manage our trash, how we manage our picnic areas, and how we manage people and individual bears, those 4 key components. And we've shown a lot of success in places like Chimney's picnic area, where back in the 80s, it wasn't uncommon for people to set their lawn chairs up, have 8 or 10 bears in that picnic area at night, or even before dark. Now we get people that come up there that used to come here in the 80s, and they say, "Where's all the bears? You've moved them all." And our response is, no, actually we haven't. We have moved fewer bears, far fewer bears now than we ever did. But the truth is, we've just cleaned it up. We've managed it better.
In backcountry sites, there are pulley systems to hang food out of the reach of bears and away from the tent sites. Bears will test the pulleys, but the system is much better than leaving food in the tent. This series of photos using a baited tent shows a bear unafraid of humans.
They'll come in there and investigate at night, and if they get some kind of food reward for doing that, they're going to come again and again and again. It's kind of like training your dog.
Since problem bears are only exhibiting learned behavior, is it possible to restore their natural instincts? The bear in this release tank was found raiding dumpsters in Gatlinburg. It was severely underweight. During rehab, the Appalachian Bear Center was able to restore his weight. But during the process, he also got a dose of human negativity.
And that negative is simply being caught, tranquilized, handled, ear tagged, and released right back into that same area. And that's a pretty negative experience for a wild animal.
During the release, the bear is clearly baffled by his circumstance. He struggles to regain his motor controls and slumps to the ground exhausted. This rehab technique, while stressful for the bear, has proven more successful than simply removing them from the park.
And it kind of puts that fear of people back in the animal, and that's where we've been successful. It's kind of like punishing somebody and putting them in jail for stealing a pencil when they really all they needed was probation, so to speak.
When pioneers first arrived, East Tennessee was a land of flowing water. Still water was a rarity. The construction of the Tennessee Valley Authority dams reversed that fact. Today, there are few free-flowing rivers in East Tennessee. Lakes provide a different habitat, and they attract and support different wildlife, primarily different birds. Birds that were uncommon or non-existent here now have a presence. The bald eagle is one of those. A fierce symbol of our country in an unspoiled wilderness, the eagles too are adapting with the times. Here, alongside busy Highway 66 in Sevier County, just a stone's throw from a Super Kroger, a pair of eagles have built a nest. When the Heartland Series returns, Are 50,000 wintertime visitors with huge appetites really a good thing? During the 1800s, a population of resident Canada geese were reported on Reelfoot Lake in northwest Tennessee. That was the only known location in the state, and those were gone by the turn of the 20th century.
In 1951, a man in Middle Tennessee bought 12 pinyon geese from a breeder in North Carolina. Pinyon geese are geese that have had a pinion bone removed from their wings and thus cannot fly. However, they can breed, and that they did. Before long, they had spread from the man's private estate to Old Hickory Reservoir.
Seeing that success, the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency started a program to spread the birds across the state in 1966. Afterwards, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and TVA got involved. By 1989, every reservoir and major river system in the state had at least one stocking of the birds. The population in Tennessee is made up almost entirely of the subspecies called the giant Canada goose. It is the largest goose in the world. Tennessee's Canada geese quickly adapted to living close to humans. They became concentrated in city parks, golf courses, shopping centers, and residential areas. Without hunting, the flock could double in size every 3 years. And therein lies the problem. In Middle and East Tennessee, there is grazing damage and fecal contamination on residential lawns, golf courses, beaches, and in swimming pools. The average goose produces 2 to 4 pounds of excrement a day. People who live alongside the waterways refer to these geese as lake rats. Despite the problems and the sheer number of birds, most wildlife officials consider their introduction to be a success in wildlife management. This is part of the Hiwassee Wildlife Refuge area. 6,000 acres in southeastern Tennessee have been set aside for waterfowl, both resident and migratory. 2,500 of the acres are land and 3,500 are water. The refuge is located at the confluence of the Tennessee and Hiwassee rivers. 70% of the land is wooded, mostly with pine and hardwoods. 30% of it is farmed. Crops include mostly wheat, corn, soybeans, and millet. Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency personnel farm nearly all of the tillable land on the refuge. All of the crops are grown for the waterfowl that live here. When the Hiwassee Refuge was created, waterfowl meant mostly ducks and geese. That began to change in the late 1980s. The availability of a safe, food-rich site began to attract sandhill cranes in ever-growing numbers. TWRA Wildlife Land Manager Rob Klippel is one of those farmers. He works and lives on the part of the refuge known as Armstrong Bend.
Well, our goal is actually for waterfowl. We have about 300 acres of corn and a couple hundred acres of other things. So originally we were for waterfowl. The cranes have sort of taken over, so now it's more of a crane area, but we do still have waterfowl. But the cranes' population has exploded so high that they've just taken over all the fields.
Klippel finds that one of the best ways to monitor the birds on his part of the refuge is from a boat. The cranes you see at the Hiwassee Refuge are not resident birds. They start arriving in November and generally are gone by February. The refuge is a stopover point for birds headed to Florida or Georgia for the winter. It is estimated as many as 50,000 of them stop here. Klippel also believes some actually winter here.
This is as far as they go, a lot of these. There's some in Georgia, Florida, but these stop off here because it's warmer and they don't have to move on. Until there's a large snow event or ice, they'll stay right here.
Fossil records show sandhill cranes have been living on the planet for 2.5 million years. Klippel believes they have survived because they are better equipped to survive.
These birds are intelligent, they're long-lived, they learn, live almost 20 years, so they learn on their way. They're much different than waterfowl. When you disturb them, they are going to move to a place like the refuge where they don't get disturbed.
The cranes do not nest here. That occurs in the area surrounding Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. What they definitely do here is eat.
They're opportunistic, but they do a lot of grains, corns, wheat, but they do invertebrates, small snakes, amphibians, so they're opportunistic. But mainly it's going to be dry feeding in the fields.
Seeing thousands of sandhill cranes in one spot truly is a spectacular experience. One imagines the view is similar to scenes from some remote African lake. It is easy now to understand why the observation platform at the Hiawassee Refuge is so popular in the winter. Birders from throughout the southeast gather at these prime viewing times. The small town of Birchwood hosts the Sandhill Crane Festival each year. A cruise boat from Chattanooga schedules trips in the winter for birders to view the cranes. Another 60 acres were donated to the refuge at this year's festival. Even though the cranes chose not to be anywhere in sight, the crowd happily dedicates the new acquisition. Officers of the Tennessee Ornithological Society were in attendance. Clearly, the sandhill cranes of Hiawassee Refuge are a hit with many different groups. But there's a problem.
They don't leave a kernel nowhere.
The sandhill cranes do a lot of damage to the farm, to the crops, especially the wheat when they're here in the winter for us. In Wisconsin, it's more in the spring when they're trying to plant corn. But down here in Tennessee, it's going to be the wheat. They took out maybe 20 acres we had this year. That's just nothing but soil left. There's no vegetation at all. So yeah, the farmers here in Ray County, Meigs County, they have to deal with a lot of cranes and a lot of problems, and they can get depredation permits, and they do.
You would think that this enormous concentration of birds in one place would make it easier for prey animals to hunt them. That's turned out not to be the case.
Here in Tennessee, the main predators would be coyotes and bobcats, mainly bobcats on the Hiawassee Refuge. They may take 50 or 100, but that's when you have 20 to 50,000 depending on the year.
There are other predators showing up.
Also this year we've seen the golden eagles prey on several sandhill cranes, and it's pretty neat to watch them feed on the cranes, but they are a predator of them. There goes another eagle, there's the other one. But we have 3 here, and it's hard to tell whether they're migrating through or whether they're going to be residents.
In the 1980s, TWRA tried to start a golden eagle population in Tennessee. They discontinued the program when the cranes arrived. Golden eagles also prey upon the highly endangered whooping crane. The total population of wild whooping cranes is less than 500 birds. 10 to 15 of the whoopers travel with the migrating sandhills. The sandhill crane is not a threatened species. They are hunted in other parts of the country. Until recently, the cranes that visit the Hiawassee Refuge have not been hunted during any part of their migration. However, that is changing. Kentucky has started a hunting season for sandhills, and Wisconsin is considering doing the same. The Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency is seriously considering a hunt as well. Even with a hunting season, the Wildlife Refuge would be off limits for hunting. Ironically, the revenue from the sale of hunting and fishing licenses in Tennessee funds all operations of TWRA, including the refuge. Klippel thinks the biggest challenge for any wildlife agency is keeping everyone content.
Of course, the hunters and sportsmen would like to hunt them,
The farmers, they're doing a lot of damage on their properties, but then we have the bird watchers that enjoy watching them and just seeing them. So it is hard to balance, and it's striking that balance that we have to figure out. Having people understand you can hunt things and still watch them. Anytime you propose a hunt, you don't want to hurt the population. What we propose, the population would still grow.
When we return, from a healthy population of birds to a group of animals facing an uncertain future, researchers rush to document and understand the spread of a killer disease in the bat population. The North American raccoon has come a long way since the days of Davy Crockett. Once famous for having its hide make a fine hat for the legendary frontiersman, the raccoon is practically eating at the dinner table these days. At least this bunch is eating on the front porch. Today, the raccoon occurs in urban areas where they scavenge for food during the night. In residential areas where food is abundant and cover available, they can become plentiful. Cars have not been good news for the species. A raccoon coat was extremely popular for owners of the early automobiles. The coat was also the rage for college students in the 1920s. In fact, raccoon numbers became quite low in the 1930s. The raccoon is still trapped for its fur, although it's no longer as popular. As fascinating as a porch full of raccoons may be, they are known to carry rabies and are best left to scavenge without human help. While this may look like the beginning of a hike in the mountains, these young women are really on the front line of important research. They are on their way to a cave in East Tennessee that is known for its population of bats. Riley Bernard is a doctoral student at the University of Tennessee. She, with the help of student interns, is studying the behavior of bats in winter. Up until a few years ago, such a study would have been almost purely academic. Her findings would have been important to scientific understanding, but probably little noticed elsewhere. Now the findings have a wider audience. Bernard studies the hibernation habits of bats in the southeast.
The bats up north do behave very similar to what we all think hibernation, or what we call in the bat world torpor. So bats will go into the caves around October or so, and they will bring their body temperature down to room temperature of the cave, which is usually around 50 degrees or colder. And they'll slow their metabolism down, their immune system will suppress, and basically they just kind of become still animation. And so a healthy bat will be in this deep sleep for 2 weeks, wake up to either groom themselves, get a drink of water, urinate, and then they'll go back into a normal torpor for another 2 weeks.
Near dusk, the women set up a mist net at the entrance of a cave. A mist net is constructed of a very fine but strong mesh.
Just a couple loops.
What Bernard's research is finding is that bats in the southeast behave differently than the northern bats.
My research is some of the first to identify that bats are foraging during the wintertime. So even when it's cold outside, the bats are going to take advantage of any insects that are out there, especially if they're feeling sick from the white nose syndrome.
White nose syndrome is killing bats by the millions. Since first discovered in 2006 in upstate New York, it is believed responsible for the death of nearly 6 million bats. In 6 years, it has traveled down the Appalachian chain, much like the chestnut blight.
White nose syndrome has shown up in a number of Tennessee counties and the Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
Well, I can say, having been here for 22 years, I've never seen anything like this. The types of reports that we're getting, I've never seen anything like that. You know, these bats are out, you know, they're starving to death, they're dehydrated, they're coming out looking for insects, they're getting water.
So now that white nose syndrome's here, what that does, it actually wakes up bats, or they're waking up more often. And so they wake up every few days as opposed to every 2 weeks. So they're really burning that fat reserve that they had accumulated in the fall.
While Bernard's research is not about white nose syndrome, Her field work brings her in contact with cave bats that could have the disease. At the cave site, she quickly checks an insect trap to see what insects might be available to a foraging bat.
There's not a lot of insects in here.
Then she checks a device that records the echolocations emitted by bats as they forage. Her assistants get in white Tyvek jumpsuits. The suits will be destroyed after the night's work, so as not to spread the fungus that causes white nose syndrome. The fungus, known as Geomyces destructans, lives only in the cool temperature below 59 degrees Fahrenheit. It is extremely deadly for cave-dwelling bats, with kill rates as high as 95%. The name of the syndrome comes from the fungus growing on the nose of its victims. All the women have had shots against any known disease bats may carry.
Ow.
Bats have small, sharp teeth, and they're not afraid to use them.
Tiny little teeth.
This is a needle-proof police glove. My mom was worried about me, so she got this for Christmas for me. They're pretty big.
As darkness approaches, bat activity from the cave picks up. It is obvious bats fascinate all of the researchers.
Stop it. Yeah, so this is a northern long-eared bat, Myotis septentrionalis. It has, as you can see, really big ears, so it not only is an aerial forager, so catching insects on the wing while it's flying, but it also potentially gleans, which means that it may be able to pick up some of the rustling of insect wings while it's flying and take advantage of picking those off the leaves. But he's actually echolocating right now and also screaming at us. Not all species are susceptible to white nose. This is a susceptible species. We have 9 species in total that have been found to have either the fungus or the disease. The ones that are hit the hardest are little brown bats, or Myotis lucifugus.
Tonight, they have permits to capture and release 30 bats of any species.
So this is a Myotis lebii, or an eastern small-footed bat. Their iconic feature is in their name. Their feet are incredibly small. Eastern small-footed bats also have a blondish colored fur and a black mask. I don't know if you noticed on the other bats, but they had a more pinkish ears and nose, and he just is pure black face. And you can see his ears moving around, so he's listening to us right now. 36.
Each bat captured will be measured and swabbed for the fungus.
So I just dip this in water, and then I'm going to swab his forearm 5 times. Do we have a bat in the net? Then I'm going to put it in here for, it's called RNA later. And we'll put it in the freezer and check for Geomyces.
They are examined for condition, and an ultraviolet light is used to expose any suspicious markings.
There's the little pinholes, but that's just probably from everyday use.
After the exam, a small, lightweight band is attached to their forearm, and they are released. For Bernard's project, the real prize of the night, however, is bat droppings or fecal pellets.
I'll grab it out of there. Chiropterologist lives for this stuff. No, this is gold, especially in my world. So he was totally wet from foraging on his way back to the cave, so he provided the proof that bats are foraging. Definitely not a winter pellet. I teased them apart and looked for insect pieces in here. And again, those insect pieces can look like any little legs or proboscis from a moth, antennas. So I could tell because of the scales that moths have, which under high magnification look like little forks.
Most of the bats caught so far appear healthy. And at the time of this trip, white nose syndrome had not yet been identified in this cave. However, late in the evening, the appearance of one of the bats is a concern.
So he actually has stuff on his face, like white stuff. It could be just dirt, but we'll have to check it out. Okay, I want to swab him first. I'll come with you. This may not be white nose. It might just be dirt, but he does have some white stuff on his nose. Get some of the ear too. on his ear. Let's look at his wing really fast. Let's see if there's some damage on his wing.
As the permit for 30 bats is nearly filled, the bat researchers net a rare specimen.
This is a cool bat, Rafinesky's big-eared bat.
This is the coolest bat.
It's surprising that he got into the net because usually they can see the net with their echolocation.
So you see those ears? They stick straight up. These guys are incredible.
When they're irritated, their ears go back. It looks like little ram's horns.
And they're quite a bit bigger than the other bats we've been seeing.
The death of millions of bats to white-nose syndrome will be felt by the agricultural industry first. Bats are extremely important in the control of insects. In summer months, they eat trillions of flies, mosquitoes, and moths. If a way to combat the syndrome is not discovered quickly, one delicate balance of nature is at risk, and all of us will feel that.
When the Heartland Series special, Second Nature, returns, a 200-year-old home finds the return of one species is not a welcome reunion. This structure is known as Ramsey House. It is thought to have been built between 1795 and 1797 by the English architect and builder Thomas Hope. Likely the first stone home in Knox County, it is constructed of Tennessee marble. A stone house built with Tennessee marble is a colorful stone house. For its time, and even in its preserved condition today, there is a stateliness about it. The house is considered to be late Georgian in design. The style is named for a series of English kings whose names were George. The newly independent Americans did not reject everything British. Architect and builder Thomas Hope was an Englishman. His deft sense of design is evident throughout the interior spaces. The house, inside and out, spoke to the respected position of its owner, Francis Alexander Ramsey. Ramsey happened upon the property in 1783, when he accompanied Knoxville's founder James White into the area. 3 years later, in 1786, he received grants for 200 acres from North Carolina. This includes the land where the house now stands. 9 years would pass before construction of the house began. It is unlikely the Ramseys ever called it the Ramsey House, but they did have a name for the farm, Swan Pond. His son, J.G.M. Ramsey, writing in 1875, describes it. The pond was a small but beautiful lake of placid water. It was at first perfectly clear. Over this the swans, wild geese, and ducks swam in joyful serenity, being in many places beyond the reach of the rifle ball. A beaver dam created the shallow lake, and the dam itself was described as ancient. It had been the favorite resort of trappers and hunters who came there to procure beaver pelts and feathers of swans and other birds. Yes, the place was called Swan Pond, but Ramsey was a realist. After he built the fine stone house, he drained the beautiful lake. Malaria was and is a deadly disease spread by mosquitoes. With young children in the house, he could not take the chance of disease. The ancient beaver dam was removed. Ramsey grew his farm into a plantation of more than 2,000 acres by the time of his death. Throughout the history of the property, there is no mention of the beaver returning, until now. Yes, the beavers are back, and they are intent on creating Swan Pond again. The beaver dams on the Ramsey House property have to be torn down at least annually to prevent the return of Swan Pond. Beavers are the second largest rodent in the world, and for a time were scarce in East Tennessee. The popularity of the beaver hat through the mid-1800s sparked a frenzy of trapping that nearly wiped it out. Today, the population has rebounded enough that they are often considered a nuisance. Just as the beaver's population is going up, the number of people who trap them is going down. The people in this room, represent the last practitioners of the age-old tradition.
$30, number 3.
Trapping has a long history in Tennessee. It was probably the state's first industry. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, it was a means for poor rural families to get cash. It is only natural that the rural areas of East Tennessee still produce most of the trappers. After all, the fur-bearing animals live there too. This particular gathering is an auction put on by the Tennessee Fur Harvesters Association. It is held at the VFW in Bulls Gap, Tennessee. Tennessee regulates the type of traps the trapper can use. The season generally runs from mid-November to the end of February. The season is open year-round for the beaver and the coyote. Wildlife populations have grown so much, there's no daily limit on the number of animals the trapper can take except for bobcat.
We're very comfortable with what they're trapping. We still get complaints from people with nuisance issues, especially with otters. And honestly, there's so few people actually trapping anymore that we don't believe there's going to be a real significant impact on them.
Got 2 nice otters right up here. Have a go on.
TWRA officers attend the auction to make sure 2 species have an international tag on their pelts.
That tag is designed to mark these otters and bobcats that they were actually trapped in the state of Tennessee. Those 2 species in Tennessee are not endangered or threatened. However, there are species with similar furs in other parts of the world that are, and they're very difficult to tell them apart. So that's why that regulation is there. The trapper does have a place, especially in nuisance situations. And that's one of the things that we really deal with a lot in wildlife management. We're going to continue to deal with is just nuisance.
A few years ago, prices at the auction were so low, many trappers just quit.
5 more. We can start them at $30 as well. 30 now, 5. 30.
However, prices have recently been on the upswing. As the pelts go by, they are quickly judged for quality.
It's better over here, but this one's got too many spots on it, different colors and so on. They're looking for something that's even patterned all the way down.
There are 9 fur buyers at today's auction.
We're the middle guy. We buy the fur up, and then we sell it off to the big guys that, sell to the furriers that make it into coats.
Mike McMillan has been a trapper for most of his adult life. If you have an interest, he'll sell you a DVD on how to do it. At this auction, he is mostly a fur grader and buyer.
Fur market used to be United States and Canada, and it's gradually declining here, but there's a fur boom in Asia, Europe. Most of the fur ends up in China for at least what they call processing or the tanning, and then it goes to the other parts of the world. But China is dominating right now as far as purchases and use of fur.
Mike actually makes his living in the trapping business.
We do what they call the nuisance animal control licensed by the state, McMillan Wildlife Control. I mean, that's my main business. We trap to get animals out of attics, and we do more traditional things. We do beaver control for municipalities and private landowners. So I basically trap 365 days a year.
The animals he traps most of the year do not end up on these tables.
A coyote caught in June has no value. A beaver caught in June has no value. Typically from November to the end of February is when the fur is at its peak and has value for marketability.
The changing relationship between wild animals and people is what keeps Mike and others like him employed.
It's just part of the urban sprawl situation. And, the country people used to take care of stuff themselves, and now suburbanites don't really have the knowledge or the capacity or the desire to do something like that.
As pelts arrive throughout the day, there's some evidence that trapping is not in immediate danger of dying out. Young families are part of the crowd. Here, 2 young brothers await their turn at the table.
We got 2 Maine 37 muskrat, 9 otter, 8 coons, about 50 possums.
Trapping is not an easy tradition to hand down these days. But in the crowd of aging faces, there are young ones who have found it.
Last year, I believe I bought a gun with it. A little also 22, and then this year I'm gonna buy a horse.
Whenever I tell my friends that I trap animals, they'll assume that we hurt them or that we're just killing off the population, but really we're just helping control the population.
Coming up, they're smart and they're everywhere, and nobody wants them around their house. Dealing with coyotes when Second Nature continues. The presence of white-tailed deer in Tennessee is a testament to wildlife management. The deer herd in Tennessee in 1949, when records were first kept, was tiny. They lived mostly in wildlife management areas and public lands such as parks. A little over 500 deer were taken by hunters in that year. In the 2011 season, Tennesseans killed 167,305 deer. All of this program has been focused on the relationship modern-day people have with wild animals. It can generally be summed up with one statement. Most people find them beautiful. And most people don't want to be bothered by them. They're nice to look at, but don't eat my flowers. Or my cat. The second part of that statement is what keeps Paul Ansack busy. Paul is a trapper.
A coon hunter brought to me to finish out for him. And then he also he does a little trapping, and he caught a couple bobcats, and we'll finish these for him.
And a wildlife control specialist licensed by the state.
It's a pretty place to live, isn't it?
When coyotes began to overrun a gated community near Gatlinburg, a resident called Paul to remove them.
And I get multiple calls a year about people, hey, my dog got eaten up by a coyote, or something like that.
I go up this hill here.
So yeah, coyotes are coming. Did a coyote job right in West Knoxville. We caught 7 coyotes in 5 days for this guy.
If you are the outdoor type, his office is as beautiful as any could hope for.
I get an office like this with a view. People like this are people in real offices are putting up pictures of this. I get to experience it. You got coyote tracks right here, and they're building a house right here. That's how close they're coming to, to people. Yeah, they've lost their fear a long time ago.
Paul, on today's job, is a hired predator.
This is not a sport for me, not like fishing or deer hunting or nothing like that. This is my livelihood, this is my business. Like for some guys, they'll go out and trap on the weekend. If they don't catch something, no big deal. But me, I have to catch this critter.
We follow him in the process.
In the state of Tennessee, we have to use soft catch traps. So this is actually a rubber jaw right there. And to hold the coyote even stronger so that his foot's not moving in the jaws, a lot of these traps now have a 4-coil kit on them. Makes the trap a lot stronger. Well, we had a miss. Well, not a miss, he didn't snap the trap. I caught a coyote here yesterday. We got tracks over there, he's messed around over there. He's thought about it. Another one that came in, but didn't get caught. He didn't snap the trap. The coyote stepped right here. He stepped right there. He stepped right there. Oh, then it snowed, and then it covered my trap up, so I left it. Now, it melted a little bit last night, and now my trap is exposed. So the coyote don't know what a trap is, but it's just something odd, and he probably ain't gonna want to step on that. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy boy. What is it? Hey, bad day, ain't it? Well, we caught one here today, obviously. It's a really nice location. We got a road bed that goes up the side of the mountain to the home site where I'm actually trapping the coyotes, and the coyotes are going from the valley to the top up these road beds. We got him in 2 feet. He's held really good. Real happy. The owner's going to be happy too.
By regulation, coyotes cannot be relocated. They must be euthanized. This is the reality of Paul's job, and one he understands to be correct. Wildlife management seems a contradiction in terms. More than managing wild animals themselves, modern wildlife officials attempt to keep overall populations at an acceptable level.
That's the whole thing about hunting. You want to sustain a population where it's not overhunted, underhunted. You want a nice level where there's not diseases running through, but the population isn't low either.
The definition of acceptable is what leads to controversy.
Deer neighborhoods, that's an issue. They get in, they're eating shrubs. It causes a lot of problems with between neighbors. One neighbor is feeding them and loves them, and the other one hates them. You get the same thing with geese.
Because everybody wants to move out and have a rural farm. The more we populate and move out into the country to see the wildlife, then we have interactions with the wildlife.
As people become more urbanized and move further and further away from personal food gathering, the more difficult it is for many to understand the role of a predator. And even fewer are aware of their personal role in the prey-predator landscape. Meat packaged in plastic wrap is as much the result of the prey-predator relationship as any hunting. The purpose of hunting is not just killing animals. Hunting's best role is that the prey is consumed. Effective population control. Simple nature. For the Heartland Series, I'm Bill Landry.